Hi everyone, my name is Sive. This is my channel, Stories in Sive. I talk about books on this channel, and I'm clearly joined by a very special guest. Say your name.
Diagwich, Diasmiragwich, Conasatau, Tome Gama, Germagach, August to Fain. Shout out to anyone who is off Gaeilge Irish. My name is Kate and I'm Sive's mum.
I'm so glad to be joined by my mom for a very special YouTube video. I like all the videos that I put out, but I have been extremely excited about this because this is a focus on Irish authors and we're going to be giving you Irish recommendations. You have a occupation that is really close to obviously the booktube community, so tell them what you do for a living.
Okay, I'm an outreach librarian, so we are all about access, and we have bookmobiles that go out and to rural parts and underserved parts. We go anywhere that we are invited and share and get people library cards and access to books, both digital and in print.
That's awesome. Stories in Sive is the title of my booktube channel, and I've never talked about it, but my family's Irish. My mom is from Dublin, and we are the most qualified to give you Irish author recommendations. So that's what we're gonna do in today's video, and we hope you enjoy.
I do have a preference, and I do prefer literary fiction, which is where you are learning about a culture, but it's around a character and around a plot. So you're learning without knowing that you're learning. I do have two different selections, so one is short stories and then one is a novel. This is the first Anne Enright book I've ever read. It's called The Wren, The Wren. Obviously I checked it out from a library.
Shameless plug.
Yeah. So the protagonist is Nell, and she is deeply troubled, and she gets into an abusive, creepy relationship, and for whatever reason I am really drawn to characters like that. It also really unpacks her relationship with her mum, who's a single mum, Carmen. It's really beautiful because even though there's tension between them, they really love each other and go to bat for one another. This is not a feel-good, uplift kind of book. It's really worth a read, and her prose is just beautiful. It really draws you into the characters, so they don't feel one-dimensional at all. Like, they're really fleshed out. You can become invested in Nell and you follow her into really dark places. So that's my first go-around.
Awesome. Well, clearly joined by a guest. For those of you who don't know, this is Binks, my cat. Do you give books ratings? Or it's like, I like it or I didn't like it?
So if this was out of 5, this would be a solid 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So liked it a lot more than average, but it wouldn't be a new all-time favorite.
Right. I mean, for me to give a 5-star would be...
Yeah.
So I really liked this book.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very good.
I didn't know, so you rate your books?
I do, yeah.
Out of what?
Out of 5. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And there are people who kind of do get more detailed in what that rating actually means. I only really use whole numbers, and it's also very all vibes. It's all just how I felt at the end of the book. It's this was a 4-star read.
And I mean, that is what reading is. I mean, it is an emotional response, I think, that you have.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting with The Wren, that your response towards that very complicated and maybe sometimes toxic mother-daughter relationship, that's a huge thing that's explored in fiction and women's fiction, and that people are really drawn to is those complicated mother-daughter relationships, or just any familiar relationships.
Well, Carmen, the mum, she wants to be in her business. She wants to know absolutely everything, and Nell is very secretive and really pulled in by this abusive, I mean, he's such a jerk. You're pulled in, you know what I mean? You really want her to come out of it and know that she is worth more, and you're literally pulled to the depths with her.
Right. Yeah. Well, that sounds like it would be a very harrowing read.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, maybe not the most uplifting, feel-good read. Well, that's a great segue into my first recommendation, actually, because for those of you who do not know, I am a big horror and thriller fan of books, and then my other most read genre would be sci-fi and thrillers. So the first book I have for you guys is a horror recommendation called Where I End by Sophie White. And this is a book that I read in the summer of last year, actually while I was in Ireland. And it's an isolated setting. It takes place on an island off the coast of Ireland, and it is about this young woman who is from that island and very complicated and troubled family dynamics. However, she has a mother who is, she's not verbal and she's not mobile, and so we follow Eileen, and she's the main character of the story, and she is her mother's caretaker along with her grandmother. It does turn horror very quickly. Something is not right with her mother, and it's not right actually with the house that they live in on this island, and it turns out that this town is diseased in a way that is really interesting. It completely pulled me in. The writing was fantastic.
Hang on, physically, spiritually, emotionally?
All of the above.
Okay.
All the above. It got speculative, which, do you know, like, speculative? So it gets very out there, but like in a way that I felt like too immersed in the story for me to care that, like, oh, this could never really happen in real life. But it felt so real. It was actually in my top 10 books that I read last year, and it's probably up there in my top 5 horror books of all time.
Wow.
And this is by an Irish author, and I'm very, very pleased to have found her, because she's going to be on my radar for pretty much anything else that she puts out. I will probably pick up. So
Okay, well, there's no easy segue into this next book from that, because it has nothing to do with horror at all. So this is a compilation of short stories. It's Walk the Blue Fields with Claire Keegan. I don't know if any of you have ever read any of her work. If you have not, I strongly recommend that you do. It's really hard, I think, to write short stories, and normally I'm not like a huge fan because they're short. And I don't really kind of get invested in the characters.
yeah.
Her prose is so tight. I don't know how else to describe it. It's so selective and so concise that every single word, it's like it packs a gut punch.
Wow.
She is able to write about the land. So like for the Irish, land is a really, really big part of their psyche, like wanting land and needing land. And so she actually did, Claire Keegan grew up on a farm. And if I was to give a rating, I probably would give this a 5. So I would not have chosen to read short stories because, like I said, I really love an involved character, just like a deep dive. But these are beautiful. It's like poetry. It's like you're there. You know, you can feel the landscape and the coast, the sea, the stone walls. It's a really sensual experience, I feel, anyway.
Yeah.
Her books.
Well, I've kind of been getting into anthologies, like short story collections, so maybe I should check that one out.
Absolutely.
Are both of my main characters named Eileen?
Well, it is an Irish name.
But one of them is spelled Irish and one is spelled English. Okay, you know how I said my preferred genres are horror, thriller, and sci-fi fantasy? This is I lied. This is actually a literary fiction as well. Obviously, this is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. Mom introduced me to Sally Rooney. One of the first books that I read kind of in adulthood, I was 18, was Normal People. And I remember feeling like so impacted by that story. Where Sally Rooney stands. We know she's not for everybody, and that's totally fine, but I'm still gonna give this recommendation. She has yet to put out anything, and since then, so this is also my call to Sally Rooney. Please put out another book. I'm desperate. Okay, so we follow Eileen, and a lot of Sally Rooney's stories are about really complicated relationships. And it really just dives into the complexity of female friendship specifically. There's some female rage in there, and this book follows Eileen after a breakup. So she is kind of later in her 20s, early 30s, and she's kind of just gone through this complete like switch where she had her tracks set for her life, and now everything is kind of completely derailed because she had kind of attached a lot of her future plans to this one person. I mean, it's about identity, it's about finding yourself, and then it's also about like the positive and negative influences on your friends during a time like this in your life. If having a book with a heavy plot is your preference, this is not the book for you. This is truly just a character study. And I felt really seen. Felt like Sally Rooney like opened up my brain and like articulated using words some of the feelings that I have. I have great memories of the time of my life when I read this book, and I do recognize also that that is a factor on my enjoyment on it.
Yeah.
But objectively, I do think that this is really a creative work, and yeah, it just really solidified for me that Sally Rooney is a very special author. I would recommend.
Anna Burns is the author of Milkman. She won the Booker Prize for this. She's a Northern Ireland author. I really, really enjoyed reading this. I grew up in Dublin, Baile Átha Cliath. In the 80s, really. I mean, I was born in the 60s, so the Troubles were really front and center, I think, in every Irish person's psyche. Again, this is not like necessarily an enjoyable read, but it really, you really learn a lot about a lived experience at a certain time within Northern Ireland. So there is a lot of paranoia. There's a lot of fear from the Troubles. It's just really, really beautifully written. So I could recommend this book.
Awesome.
Milkman.
Okay, I'm doing a bit of a cheat thing. I'm currently reading this book.
Ah.
Yeah, but I know that this is going to be something I can recommend to people. This is Nocturnes by John Connolly. You can see my little bookmark here. I'm about halfway through it at the moment. This is a horror, again, anthology. So I was just saying I'm kind of getting into short story collections, and this is one that I won't lie to you, I normally do a lot more research than I did with this book in books before I buy them. I picked this up on recommendation because one person, one time on the internet said that there was the scariest clown story that they had ever read in this book. And I was like, okay, I'm buying that.
But you respected, the
but
person
I know,
who reviewed it? Or,
yes, and their recommendations would be something that like we would kind of line up and we would match things we liked and things we didn't. So it wasn't like, I guess, maybe as impulsive as I'm making it out to be. But when I was recommended the book, I didn't know that he was Irish, John Connolly, and so that was kind of like, okay, cool thing. We're about to film this video. Like, awesome. Let's get into it and see how it is. Nope, I'm not going to give you the plot, but it's speculative. It's horror. The writing is absolutely terrifying. It really just gets you with those still moments. The way he writes empty space and like quiet. It really does evoke that suspense and that feeling of just like being on the edge of your seat. Yeah. So when I kind of go through short stories, I do rate them as I'm finishing the short stories, and I rate them individually of each other. Sometimes I'll do the average, the actual math average, and then other times I'll just be like, okay, vibes, this was a 3-star read or a 4-star read. I knew that I was gonna get a 5-star from this, but I got it like almost immediately within the first like 3 stories was a 5-star read. And short stories are kind of difficult though sometimes because you might love one and give a 5-star like me, but I've also given a short story in here a 2-star.
It depends.
Yeah.
I mean, like it really depends on the story or like what grabs you or...
And some of the short stories are 70 pages, whereas some of them are 15 pages.
Yeah.
I'm an amateur like short story reader. And because I love to read dense fantasy and I read 600-page books, sometimes I'll finish these and be like, that was such an amazing concept. Why didn't you do more with it? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily with this book, but with other short story anthologies that I've read.
Yeah.
Again, I'm kind of cheating. I haven't read the whole thing, so I can't like fully recommend, but I can tell you I'm really loving this one so far. Okay, so recommendations, those were what we recommend to start with. Yeah. And then on our radar, you said Emma Donoghue. Mm-hmm. And then what was the other
John Boyle.
John Boyle. Okay, and those are also literary fiction books? Okay. Or authors. Surprise. Some books that are on my radar as far as Irish authors go is another book by Sophie White. So Where I End, which is the horror that I first recommended, she has another book that feels like the complete opposite. So it's a contemporary, it's kind of like a literary fiction, women's fiction, and you can probably see from the cover that it's very like bubblegum, like it's a little like lighter.
Yeah. But
this book, just in synopsis, kind of really sounds similar to a Sally Rooney book. So it's about these three girlfriends, and it is about one of them is kind of falling behind in perception of what like society deems as successful. So one of her friends is a very successful podcaster, and her career is just like really starting to take off, and like she's gaining a lot of traction with her work. And then the second friend of hers has just had a baby, and so she's kind of settling down, and she's absolutely in the joys and
the highs and
lows of motherhood. And so our main character is the third friend and is just not in any situation that would be classified as successful. She has a dead-end job. I think she like lives in this really grungy apartment, and she does not have future plans. I think it's about that very toxic friendship dynamic. So that's the first one. Again, Sophie White. I enjoyed her writing, but this feels very, very different from that isolated horror. So we'll be interested to see like how she handles a very different genre. The next one I'll talk about very briefly is Hazel Hayes' new book, which is coming out this April, is called Better by Far. I read her debut novel and it was okay. I didn't like love it, but because I want to support her. I've watched her on YouTube for a long time, and her venture into writing is just I just want to support her. And also it's like a debut, and sometimes your debuts are not your best work for most people. So this is a book about a relationship. It's a contemporary romance, but it's also kind of like leans into the darker side of like a dark comedy, which is something she specifies in and does very well on like the YouTube side. This last one, I absolutely adore the cover. Do you see this cover? So this next book gets me really, really excited. It's probably the one I'm the most excited about. It's called The Glorious Heresies, and it is about heretics in the modern sense of the word. So the plot revolves around a crime that has happened. A person has been murdered. This murder brings together 5 of people from very, very different walks of life. But everyone is kind of on like under the poverty line. Every one of these characters, they come from very different areas, and everyone is kind of from the underworld. The synopsis gives us very little about what the plot is actually about. The classification of genre is crime and contemporary literature, but all of the synopsis is just describing who these people are. So I think, again,
are they sketchy? Like, are they super sketchy?
Yeah. Well, let me hear.
Like, are they, vagabonds
I'll
and
read
thieves,
this to you.
or
One messy murder affects the lives of 5 misfits who exist on the fringes of Ireland post-crash society. Ryan is a 15-year-old drug dealer, just desperate not to turn out like his alcoholic father, Tony, whose obsession with his unhinged next-door neighbor threatens to ruin him and his family. Georgie is a prostitute whose willingness to feign a religious conversion has dangerous repercussions.
What?
While Maureen, the accidental murderer, has returned to Cork after 40 years in exile to discover that Jimmy, the son she was forced to give up years ago, has grown into the most fearsome gangster in the city. In seeking atonement for the murder and a multitude of other perceived sins, Maureen threatens to destroy everything her son has worked so hard for, while her actions risk bringing the intertwined lives of the Irish underworld into the spotlight.
Wow.
Does that not just sound like something you want to read? So yeah, those are all of the books that are on our radar as far as Irish authors go, and then of course a few recommendations for you.
I mean, as it is March, and we are all into all things Irish.
That's right.
Now is a moment that you can delve in to all of the many authors. There's so many young and upcoming Irish authors as well. Be on the lookout for them. Yeah,
just supporting and reading Irish authors is always important. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you bringing your literary fiction
You're welcome.
angle to my normal horror and fantasy YouTube channel. So yeah, that's everything we've got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. And other than that, have a great rest of your day. I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye. But you didn't do the subscribe to my channel